Hey everyone, I'm thrilled to walk you through a number of great features coming to Dash Enterprise and App Studio in 5.5. Let's take a look at what's coming in the latest release. First, we have data sources which help you configure connections to popular data providers and run queries with SQL. The Run button prevents inadvertently running costly API calls. Scheduling, which increases app performance by caching data on an interval. And large data sets, showing data sets greater than 1,000 rows to your users. First up, let's talk data sources. Prior to 5.5, to establish a connection with a data provider, it was up to your application developers to use Python libraries to configure the connection. You'd end up writing the same code over and over in every application you develop, which adds time to the development process and maintenance hassle when you need to rotate a credential used in multiple applications. The new data sources feature lets you create these connections at the platform level, saving you development time and making it easier to update connections used across many applications. It also makes collaboration simpler by allowing you to grant access to teammates globally or on a user by user basis. In 5.5, you'll be able to connect to Databricks, Snowflake, Redshift, BigQuery, and AWS S3. And if you don't see the data provider you're looking for, stay tuned as we're adding support for Azure Data Lake and a generic SQL connector for services like MotherDuck and Postgres and more. Let's take the new data sources feature for a spin. Choose from one of the 5 data providers available and you'll be taken to the configuration wizard. Enter the name for the connection and optionally add a description to help you identify it later. Then enter the credentials. Here we'll specify the host name and the path. Choose from one of the 2 authentication methods, a personal access token or an OAuth machine-to-machine connection. It's important to note that the credentials you provide will not be shared directly with users of this connection. They simply have access to the data. Once the credentials are entered, we can select the access level for this connector. Choose restricted if you only want certain users on the platform to have access, or choose authenticated to allow any platform user to use this data source. Once the connection is created, it will be displayed in a list, just like your applications. You can click into any of these connections, view and update configuration parameters, and even see an example code snippet, showing you how to use the connection in a workspace. The code snippet uses a brand new module we're shipping with Dash Enterprise libraries called data_sources. With this library, all you need is a SQL statement and a data connection name to perform a query and return a data frame in your application. All of the authentication workflow happens under the hood, making it fast and easy to retrieve data in your app. To access data sources within an app, there's just one last thing we need to do. In the App Management panel, I have a new tab called Linked Data. In this tab, I can see a list of all the data sources that have been either created by me or shared with me. Pressing the plus icon next to any data source will link it and make it available in the workspace. Note that the workspace will restart, and then I'm ready to develop my app. But how do you know what data you have access to while working in your application? Well, in past releases, you needed to run API calls in your workspace to list the tables available to you, or you'd need to have that data provider running in a separate browser tab that you can refer back to. And while functional, it kind of takes you out of the flow of the application development, and that's where the new Schema browser comes in. The Schema browser gives you a window into any connected data source. You can see all of the databases, schemas, and tables in a single view, inspect column names for a table, and even preview the data before you work with it. No more switching to another tab to find the table you need or accidentally mistyping the fully qualified table name when crafting your query. It's never been easier to find and use data within Dash Enterprise. So let's see this in action. In my workspace, in the left-hand toolbar, we have a new data source icon. Click that, and you'll see a list of linked data sources for this application. Clicking on a data source will load the list of database schemas, tables available to you, and clicking on a table name will open a panel at the bottom of the browser that lists all of the columns and column types for that table. Clicking any column name will copy it to the clipboard, which is pretty helpful when writing queries. And each table also has a context menu, allowing you to copy that fully qualified table name or open up a preview of the table right here in the workspace. The table preview will load several hundred rows of data, helping you understand the contents. When you're ready to write a query, simply press the copy code button, and the same snippet we saw earlier will be copied to the clipboard. The code snippet provided gives you a fully runnable query with a limit to prevent loading an entire table unless you really want to. The data frame returns just like any other data frame, and App Studio automatically picks it up and puts it in the app layout. The combination of data sources and the schema browser ushers in a new era for Plotly workspaces, letting you more easily explore your organization's data, write ad hoc queries, and use the results in your data app. Also included in 5.5 is App Studio's new Run button feature. First, a little context. In App Studio, anytime a user updates a control input, all dependent callbacks are run automatically. And this is great when you want to enable fast interactions between the control panel and your visualizations. But imagine for a moment that you have several form fields that need to be set to run a valid API call, or maybe that the API call itself is pretty expensive and you don't want to run it every single time a user moves a slider. The new Run button addresses this problem by preventing callbacks from running unless explicitly requested by the user. When activated, anytime you make a change to an input, App Studio will wait until the user has pressed the Run button before fetching the data or running the control logic. This feature enables a whole new class of use cases that App Studio can address, and we're excited to see what you build with it. All right, I'll show you how it works. Simply toggle the Run button inside the app editor and resync, and now any downstream callbacks that rely on your control panel inputs will be gated by a button press. App Studio automatically wires everything together for you, so you don't have to write any code beyond the control flow you're already using in your application. And one last bit of polish we're introducing is that you'll now see loading indicators on any dependent data cards in your app when loading occurs. The last feature we're going to cover today is the scheduling feature. Have you ever needed to cache data in your app on a schedule? Well, maybe you have an expensive API call that populates a data frame in your application. You can't run it every time. And writing the caching logic by hand, well, it's repetitive and time-consuming. App Studio's scheduling feature detects code that makes sense to run on a schedule and caches the result on a frequency that you define without a single line of code. In the app editor, the new schedule panel offers simple form inputs for setting the schedule or the ability to use cron syntax. The results are cached and used anytime downstream dependencies reference the scheduled variable. This makes it easy to schedule updates on a predetermined interval and saves you the hassle of writing the equivalent code. In the app editor, we'll click on the calendar icon in the right toolbar, which opens the scheduling UI. First, notice that App Studio will tell you which variables are eligible for scheduling. Logic that populates these variables will be run on the determined schedule. You can choose from two scheduling options, interval and cron. Interval lets you choose a time zone and a repeat cadence with a simple dropdown. You'll see a preview of the next several runs to help you ensure the schedule is set appropriately. And if we instead use the cron mode, you can set the time zone and use cron syntax to define the schedule. Once we're happy with the schedule, we simply confirm it using the primary button below, and now the schedule has been set and we can easily disable it again if needed. And with that, I'll hand things over to Nathan, who's going to show you large dataset support in App Studio. Take it away, Nathan.
Thanks, Matt. Super excited about all that functionality to come to App Studio. I'm Nathan. I'm a product manager at Plotly, and I'll be talking about large table support in App Studio and Dash Enterprise 5.5. So let's take a look at a project I've been working on in App Studio. In this project, I'm loading in a large data set, about 300 megabytes, and it comes from a CSV that I've uploaded into my workspace, and you can see it has almost 2 million records here. So this is a huge chunk of data. I'm slicing and dicing it plenty. I have a smaller version here where I'm grouping by different categories. This data shows Amazon purchases and purchase prices. I have another data set that shows slightly different group by, and I have a few charts that I'm using to show the purchase price over time. So when I loaded this into App Studio in 5.4, it would load it up with a shortened data set, about 1,000 records. And this is because if you load a large number of rows into your browser, it could cause issues. You can't just send 300 megabyte files over the wire and expect everything to work okay. Now in 5.5 with App Studio, we have large dataset support, which means all of your tables that are loaded in as pandas data frames in your original notebook are automatically rendered, and you can enable large tables for those. So here's the App Studio app that was generated from this notebook. And you can see here's the charts that I have. And here are the data sets. And where previously you would see this would only have 1,000 records, in this case, you can see all 1.8 million. And this is a fully interactive table. I can page through. Obviously, paging through 1.8 million records is going to be a little tricky, but I can also search, sort, and filter. So let's look for all of the products that are coffee related. And let's sort to find the most expensive ones. So here's an automatic coffee center. Not 100% sure what that is. And there's more than 20,000 results that came up from this search that happened almost instantly. A large table support is backed by DuckDB, which enables this powerful search and search, sort, and filter capabilities. And it means it's really easy for end user application to work with these kinds of large data sets. Every table is configured with large data set support, which uses server-side pagination to grab only the records that you're showing on the screen and make sure that your page loads are really snappy in your deployed applications. So if you're using App Studio in 5.5, you can enable this by going into the control settings and flipping on the View Large Datasets toggle. That's it. If you want to disable it or truncate your datasets for some reason, that's always an option as well. And you can just flip that switch off. By default, it's disabled. I just want to make sure that folks are opting into this feature who want to show all of their data and make sure that everyone is viewing that. So I'm really excited about this feature, really excited to bring large dataset support to App Studio and all the users of App Studio, and excited to see the kinds of projects that this enables. Back to you, Matt.
Thanks, Nathan. Well, we hope you enjoyed taking a look at the exciting new features coming in App Studio in 5.5. Here's a quick recap of what we just walked through. Data sources, making it easier to connect to popular data providers and manage those connections. The Run button, which prevents running application logic unless a button is pressed. The scheduling feature, which increases app performance by caching data on a set interval. And large datasets, showing larger datasets to your users than previously possible in App Studio. If you have any questions or feedback on the features you've seen today, don't hesitate to reach out to the product team here at Plotly. We're always eager to hear your thoughts. And with that, I'll hand it over to our next presenter. Thanks, everyone.